Good afternoon, everyone. Before we start, a small amount of audience participation, if that's allowed. Polling the audience, or maybe hands in the air for, if you only had one superpower, what would it be?
Okay, so just one. I would stop time briefly to take naps and read books.
Okay, that's short of time travel, I guess.
I would be able to project empathy on people.
Project empathy, that's innovative, yeah. Multilingual, awesome. Right, that was a good three. Maybe if I float some out there. Any hands for X-ray vision? Nobody. X-ray vision, pretty cool. What about teleportation? Okay, teleportation we're in. Time travel? Okay, that'll do for now, that's pretty cool. One last pop trivia question. Can we name anyone on the board? Guy on the left's easy. Elon Musk. These guys? Sorry? No. Gordon Moore, co-founder at Intel. Moore's Law, which I'll cover in a wee second. Masayoshi Son, SoftBank. Anybody? Founder of SoftBank, $93 billion vision fund entirely into new technology. I'm not sure if this is true, but I read a tweet yesterday. I think they're about to double through the fund, so it's going to be a $200 billion fund, trying to fund the next generation of technology with a purpose, which we'll cover. And I think, no Elon Musk, kind of forget sometimes he was PayPal. He was the guy that came up with and launched and invented PayPal and sold it. Because that's where his kind of super wealth came from. I guess he's in and out of the news lately for various reasons. Gordon Moore, Moore's Law, we talk about the power of computers roughly doubling every 2 years. He then subsequently, about a year later, said that'll last for about 10 years and it'll stop. That was the 60s, I think. We're kind of still on the same trajectory. It's incredible to look at the pace of changing it. It's exponential. So it doubles every 2 years. And that's the power of the computing that we have. It's pretty obvious when you think about it. Say again? What's my mic? Turn it on. It's always the tech boy that can't do the tech. Are we on? Is that better? Yeah. Awesome. Right, cool. I can hear the echo now. Another way to describe that is that change has never happened this fast before and will never happen this slow again. And we're on up ramp with the pace of change of technology. Some Elon Musk stuff, whether you buy it or not, like he's deeply involved in an awful lot of technology. He does get to see behind the scenes a lot of what's happening. And he is openly quite worried about things like the pace of change of AI. He talks about it being close to exponential, DeepMind at Google, for instance. He also quite specifically talks about job disruption and how the robots are going to come and take all of our jobs. Masayoshi Son, I think he's put his money where his mouth is. His vision fund is an incredible thing. He talks about metal collar as being a new generation of worker that we're about to see. So an awful lot of white and blue collar jobs will be automated, will be covered by robots. And he's really talking about what's the value of our lives, existential stuff. This is kind of where I want to get to with this. He predicts 30 years from now, the number of smart robots will be 10 billion, will be a larger population than humans. Other people define that, or something like that, as the singularity. It's the point at which technological capability, AI, robots, whichever combination you like, outstrips just about everything that a human is capable of. It does sound totally sci-fi, but that is what some very serious people are thinking of and talking about. So his $93 billion, I think it's just been doubled through. He was asked why are you doing this? Why are you committing to this space? What is it about this? I only have one belief, the singularity. The only thing that focuses out all of his work and all of his career is about dealing with and handling the singularity. When is it due? When's it going to happen? Oh, sorry, another definition, cool definition, is the point at which the last million years of change will be superseded in the next 5 minutes. Just another way to define the incredible rate of change that exponential results in. And a break in human evolution that's called the stagnant speed of technology. So various ways to look at the singularity. When, okay, Wikipedia isn't the most sort of solid source for everything, but you're talking about a general opinion that it's not 200 or 400 or 1,000 years away. We're not talking about some distant future, we're talking about 2040 to 2050 is widely predicted when the singularity will occur. That's when my kids are my age. It's probably exactly a generation ahead. It means we need to deal with it right now, and we need to understand what it means, and as a race, of people, and as a community, how we deal with that. So there's a bit out there. I'll bring it back to here, and then I'll maybe try and feed that back in at the end as to how I think it applies. So I'll properly introduce myself, Martin McDonnell, founder at Soluis, co-founder and CEO these days at Sublime. I'll quickly cover each. Soluis we founded 18 years ago. Steve and I were there in the beginning, and the idea was to better engage our audiences with a project, and typically that was architecture or construction and infrastructure. We've gone on, I'll skip that just because it's noisy, that's great. We've gone on for the last 18 years to build that company. We now have offices in Glasgow and London, and work on some of the bigger and more exciting and interesting architecture construction projects globally. This is a project in Dubai. It's a typical workflow. This is actually just an architect's sketch and a few thoughts that we translate into quite a believable and real and hopefully wow set of images, which they then use to communicate their vision in their project. So high-end architectural visualization. Lots of works in airports, loads of work in the hospitality sector, brands like Radisson we've worked with all over the world. And one, two kind of mega cities, and there's a lot happening in this space. We're talking about building cities out of fresh air. And I guess the core of our business, to some extent, is still high-end residential property sales. So one of the key uses of this tech and this approach is to envisage the future and sell property. Short video here. As well as still imagery, an awful lot of what we have always done. I guess we've probably done more than most in terms of animating. And we used to call them walkthroughs. I think it's more now about delivering narrative via film. It's about telling the story of a building or a space or a project via film. And I think that's where our evolution into some other sectors, including heritage in quite a big way, has come. That ability to deliver narrative through some 3D, sometimes 2D, but typically through a story or journey through film. So Sublime, Soluis has been running for 18 years. Within Soluis we typically have entirely digital artists, not actually technologists. We're talking about people who can create beautiful imagery and films through a digital medium. Sublime occurred really because we started to come across technical challenges within our own workflow, which we then took on and started to solve. And that meant hiring a developer for the first time, and then 2 developers. And being able to solve our own problems was fantastic. We then started to take on some clients' problems and begin to solve some of those, found we were quite good at it. But we were also solving quite significant problems in the industry to do with workflow and data sets. And for us, or for me in particular, and a few of us, we realised that this is quite a different approach to our industry, and we're taking on and solving some different things. So incubated within Soluis for a while, we had a developer team, and we realised there was an opportunity to take that out of Soluis and turn it into something different, a tech company, and ultimately, somewhat fashioned on the Silicon Valley tech startup scene, we decided to spin out Sublime. At that time, or about a year previous, we'd come across a guy, I think some of you know, Johnny Knox, who had a deep knowledge and a real interest in the use of dome shapes, dome structures to create immersion. To be able to project on the inside of a sphere, and you've probably seen our portal here, to deliver what I would now frame as VR but with no headset. I think that the whole dome scene comes way before the kind of current flush of VR. But now to me it's really obvious that the VR experience that you get in a headset as a solo experience, you can now have shared in a projected space. That and what we saw as the nascent and coming world of AR were the 2 key interests and the 2 spaces that we thought we had something to offer, and we'd already begun to dabble and create some of our own solutions. I'll give you another little bit of personal history. So this is me, geek boy of the 80s, sort of 10p I think it was, and someone had to hold me up and you put your head inside and you could shoot the tanks. But that was VR in the 80s. That was a VR headset game in the 80s. Definitely plenty of sci-fi in my background, TV, games again. I think we have a decent geek demographic in the room. So that's the 90s, awesome game. He's an augmented human, he's getting augmented eyes, augmented implants, etc. And he's able to puzzle his way through or fight his way through a series of kind of levels, adventures, whatever. But it's his augmented powers that kind of set him apart. Definitely my favourite author, Bar none, and specifically Ian M. Banks on the sci-fi side. This guy, along with many others, you go way back to Isaac Asimov, Arthur C. Clarke, or whatever you like. Sci-fi, I think, has genuinely been trying to address the future societal challenge of super advanced technology for a long time. There's an awful lot of coverage of augmented humans, but also what does it mean when we have minds in Ian Banks' world, which are way, way, way massively beyond the capacity of a human. I think there is plenty of useful stuff to be explored there. It often ends up dystopian, which is probably my key bugbear with an awful lot of sci-fi, is the easy route into dystopia is often taken, whereas I think there's potentially plenty of utopian ways forward. Didn't mean to leave these in here, there's too much geekery here, let me skip. Genuinely didn't mean to leave my entire geek history line here, right? No suggestion. Yes, okay, cool. Back to proper geekery, right? Superheroes the award, pick a superhero, and then we can start talking about the superpowers that each of these guys have. This is sci-fi, this is everything I'm talking about, sci-fi. Guy Middle's Iron Man. But just over a year ago now, I think 18 months ago in Glasgow, Iron Man arrived. So Iron Man flew into the Tech Talk sessions in Glasgow. And the helmet he's wearing, we about a year ago had delivered slightly more boringly on a construction project for Crossrail, because it gives you a really cool version of AR. That's real tech. You can fly up and down the street in this thing. His name's Richard Browning, invented this Iron Man suit. Samsung and many others, and Google and others, are patenting augmented reality contact lenses now. I don't think they work yet. I think they're very, very, very difficult to build. But science fiction is very much rapidly becoming science fact, and I think on that exponential sort of technology curve. I won't spend too much detail or time in here, but we try to group and view and again, call it what you like, emerging technologies. Some of these technologies have been emerging for a very long time, so probably don't deserve the title, but the idea really is that there's a lot of fundamental technology that's going to seismically shift and step up our capability or our level of data or connectivity. We, I think, all talk a lot about data generation and the data we can create and we are creating by default these days. We definitely need a big layer of data interpretation technology, and again, choose your own phrases or what you choose to call it all. But I think somewhere in the machine learning AI space, we desperately need, otherwise we just get big piles of data. How do we get insight? How do we get actionable insight to make something useful? And with all of this stuff, and I think we must find it all, I can't believe the number of different messaging apps I have on my phone that try to connect into all the different stuff. How do we get a view, how do we get a window into our world, our data world, as our data world explodes around us? We see VR and AR rapidly becoming a key way to view and enter and see our data world and access it. So that's another kind of, if you like, broader part of our thinking. I say VR, AR a lot, virtual reality, augmented reality, and I'm okay with those two R's. It begins to get tricky with mixed, merged, real. This is real, I think. XR, I think, is all realities. That one's extended. That one I never remember. So there's too many R's, and there's just too much terminology in this space. It is too confusing. We throw a blanket over it and call it digital realities. The broad thought is that almost everything that was on the board there and the breadth of it will converge really into one broad technology, which is just our ability to see and overlay data around the world and enter data visually and spatially. So back to Sublime. Our specific purpose, as we've set it up, is to address these two spaces. As I've said, virtual and augmented reality. We rephrase those as shared immersion, the ability to share in an immersed space. And we're very specifically looking at the world of work and how augmented reality will play there, AR, for the world of work. Cover shared immersion quite quickly. This has been the cool poster child image as VR launched with the Oculus. It's amazing, it's a really cool experience, and it is a great experience. I think many of us have tried, we do a lot of work in that space, we still deliver loads of projects in VR headsets, and it is a fantastic experience, particularly if it's tailored to the purpose. And in our sense, often that's going forward in time to visit a space or a place that's not yet built. It's incredible to be able to stand at one-to-one scale, teleport around, or visit and investigate or interact with a world that's not yet built in a super real, very photoreal way. That is quite often the reality of VR headsets. And I think kind of everybody who wants to comment a little bit negatively in VR usually chooses something around here. And it's fair and it's right and it's accurate. VR hair is definitely a thing, the red mark's definitely a thing, and everyone comes out with a bit of a face. So that's real. How do we deal with that? I think in some cases you don't, if it's in the privacy of your own home and gaming, or if you're doing training for health and safety, it probably doesn't matter so much. I think if you're in any kind of public scenario, an event, a museum, a shopping mall, something like this, you don't want to be looking like this. And if you're aiming at a customer base that's quite high end, there's no chance of them engaging in this and embarrassing themselves in that way. Additionally, it's solo and isolated if you have a headset on. It's a solo experience. There are ways that you can share the space with other people in an avatar way, but we feel that if we can share as humans in an immersed way, maybe in our portal, then that changes up the game. You get more out of it and react more naturally as humans. This is not shared immersion. I used to use this slide, took it out, I stuck it back in again recently, probably for interesting reasons, but that's not shared anything. You know, that's Lord Zuckerberg and his minions wired up to the Matrix. That's game over, and if that's the future, I'm not playing. But I think that's what we don't need. Our view is you need something more like this, something where there is no technology barrier, you don't need to commit to tech by wearing something, and you can just walk in, engage in a one-to-one scale as a group. And I think for us that's, well, certainly where we're headed with it. There's just a quick example of VR versus film. I talk quite a lot about photorealism and the accuracy and the believability of VR. For that to be achieved, we need various things, but we definitely need to look VR to film. We need it to look almost as a physical replica of the real world. Certainly through photograms and capture, we can do that. Again, VR film. These are all CG, these are all created from designs. That's not capture of something that existed. Our VR pre-existed the real space by a year, and the client and their clients were able to go and visit, in this case, a new hotel brand before it was built. Very much using Unreal Engine as a full piece of tech. One more kind of project or kind of usage. There's a client of ours looking to rebrand, re-envisage and change the direction of the entire country. To deliver a vision at that scale, it has to be visual by default, there's no point in talking words. And I think if you can immerse your audience in your vision, then you have an opportunity to engage with them in a completely different way. And right back to 2000, our mission from day one was to better engage audiences with a project. And at a grand scale, this is what we did about a year ago. So this was a 14-metre diameter, 5-metre tall, 270-degree screen that bled from the wall across the floor onto you and delivered you a kind of cool sort of infographic voice over vision of the future. We also built 3 of our portals. The one that's here is 4 metres. The 3 we built were 8 metres. So if you cube it, it's like quite a lot bigger basically. It's the size of a small house. You can get 20 people in there on a raised platform, and full 360 immersion and full 360 content. 3 of them covering each of 3 key sort of mega projects. Play the film piece. There's some well-known faces at the front end of this. So this was world leaders, entrepreneurs, tech leaders, heads of banks, heads of investment companies, all coming together. It was dubbed Davos in the desert, so it was kind of rerunning the World Economic Forum, but in a Middle Eastern context, and looking at how to reshape to a very utopian vision of gender equality, of open for business to the world, 100% renewable energy. If that could be achieved in this space, then I think it'd be something quite incredible. There was a conference running on one side of the hall, and on the other side of the hall we delivered a bunch of experiences that enabled you to visit that vision. So again, we're standing surrounded by media that leads across you onto the floor in this case. Smaller exhibits, and then what we call portals, 8 metres in diameter. You stand within in a small group. Just about everyone whipped out their phones, and as if they were somewhere. And again, the language people use when they come out and spoke to them. When I was there, I was on the roller coaster. I did the skiing when I was in the stadium. That first-person language tells you that there's a level of presence, there's a level of believability in the place that you created that they then visited. I think just to even change the language and talk in that way tells you what we are able to deliver by way of an experience. The first one we saw was entirely CG. This was almost an animated infographic talking about all of the future industries. The last piece was all capture, so it was all 360 video. There's a new piece being done with a lot of photogrammetry to capture very large land areas. And if I don't run out of time at the end, which I might, I'll show you a very quick piece of really high resolution GIS work we've done and dropped into VR. This is now all film. In this case, it was a remote part of the Middle East that you can't currently access, that we were given access to for 10 days. So as well as visiting the future, we can visit remote places that are currently inaccessible and give an audience that ability to go and visit that place. Okay, so that was shared immersion. The other, and probably ultimately much bigger part of what we're doing at Sublime is trying to build a future platform for the augmented worker. We're kind of getting into the superhero territory here, super enhanced abilities, or is it superpowers for the workers of the future? Obviously I asked you at the beginning, this is a little list of mine: precognition, spidey sense, super intelligence, an interesting one, definitely X-ray vision, time travel, teleportation, telepathy. If we all had those superpowers, how cool would it be? It would be pretty cool. If we had those superpowers in the world of work, what could and would we do with them? And although that's not entirely our premise, I genuinely think we're beginning to build some of those things. I think if you look at what we did with those big domes in the Middle East, we took people to the future, and they talked about when I was here, when I was there. We were able to transport them to an inaccessible place through standing in a delivered environment. Okay, we're cheating with the teleport and time travel thing, but you get the point, is that if you can convince the human, and if you think of the Matrix, I think that idea of being able to completely convince the body that you are somewhere else, it's not very far away. I think we're kind of there with the eyes, we're definitely there with audio and eyes. They're our primary senses, we've not got much further to go, and there's loads of people working on cool haptic stuff and all sorts of things. I think we'll be able to quite soon convince our body that we are somewhere else. And if then we can construct somewhere else's that are super convincing or capture them, then we kind of have teleportation and time travel. This is our co-founding team. I think, again, some of you know Johnny Knox. Chris Bryson's a long history in AR and VR. We'll skip through a few of these. So we have 2 Innovate UK funded projects up and running, totaling close to £2 million in funding over 3 years. This one officially started about a month ago, and that is where we have taken, I'll just skip to here, 5 use cases in the construction sector. And we are kind of talking about superpowers. So digital job guidance gives us a little view of the future and allows us to manipulate it, allows us to drop digital into the world around us and play with it. This one's awesome. This is shared intelligence. And I think, I mean, I'm terrified of electricity, changing plugs of trauma. That I would stop dead. However, a well-skilled but not experienced electrical engineer can now take on a whole range of jobs that they couldn't touch previously, because they can beam in either a digital version step by step by step, locked on to the step of the job they need to complete, each step, or if they get stuck, they can dial in the remote expert who can arrive in their world and mark up their world for them. You can say, don't touch, don't cut the red wire, or that's really hot, watch out, you're going to get burned, or that's gas. But those markups live on the real world around the engineer in the field. I think the ability to do that is sharing minds, that is sharing spaces. This is kind of you in the future, so this is looking at the time planning of a project and running it forward in time in front of you. I think Spidey Sense is definitely imminently going to be available in all industries. So because the various bits of plant, trucks, people, etc. are censored, if someone is on their phone and straying into the wrong area, it can do parking beepers, beep, 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 beep. If they walk into the path of the swing, the digger will cut, the guy driving that will cut, the guy foreman on the side will get a message and his vest will vibrate and the whole lot will happen before someone gets hit. Spidey sense. I know I'm kind of cheating, but the point is that I think a lot of that vision of sci-fi, we can start to grow from that and use it. Another really neat one is if our vision tech gets better, we'll actually be able to read dials on vision. We'll definitely have heat vision. So we'll be able to see at a glance if everything in this room is at normal temperature. And I think, again, that hooked back to a database just makes workers super efficient and much safer. X-ray vision, Steve and the guys at Soluis Heritage actually did a project in Paisley where through an iPad AR piece you got to see through to some of the underground heritage. And then if you think of that ability and all the capture stuff we've just been looking at, the ability to see the heritage around us as data and see through things is really key. So in this case it's a little bit more boring, we're looking at the various utilities that run in the street. But if we can accurately just look and see the position of those, then again everything becomes a lot more efficient and a lot safer. So those are the use cases we're addressing one at a time over 3 years. Quite a few of those we've got working prototypes. So that remote expert electrical board thing, we can do that and it's quite good. We can do that with the HoloLens, we've tested it in the Magic Leap, it works. So between kind of today's technology, it's maybe not quite ready to go out in the field and be used yet, we can prove and prototype these kind of future techs. It doesn't quite look cool enough yet, for sure. You know, you've got a big box in your head, you've got a big massive screen. That's exactly smart helmet. That's the thing that Iron Man flew into the event with sort of 18 months ago. It works, you know, it overlays digital in the world around us. The last 2 or more years, it's a little bit better, isn't it? It's a little bit lighter. Depends what your taste in fashion eyewear is, but yeah, it's still a big screen on your face. Magic Leap, again, has just gotten a little bit better. It's lighter, it's neater. You wear the computing, so not so much sort of weight and heat and things up here. It's also somewhere 5 and 10 times more powerful than the HoloLens for those of you that are in that space. We're releasing some stuff on the Magic Leap probably next week. And our thing is really about being hardware agnostic as well as a bunch of other things. So we've got the HoloLens, a Magic Leap and an iPad all sharing the same virtual model in the virtual space at the same time, and they can all see each other and see what each person's in. A platform agnostic future. I think our tech, and certainly AR, has to get here before we're kind of going to be walking down the street with it and we're not wearing the HoloLens. And I think even the Magic Leap, you need to be deep into steampunk gold cosplay or something to pull off a Magic Leap in public. But if we can get here, then I think there's a whole range of workplaces that would adopt instantly, because there's loads of people that wear safety glasses to work. So I think we could start to pick off those really obvious, easy use cases, deliver the tech, deliver the facility of X-ray vision, be able to jump into the future of a construction project, and being able to pull down any data sources available from the cloud live into a vision remote expert. I think when we can do that, we can talk truly about workers of the future having superpowers. They're not really superpowers, because this is definitely the right
superpower guy to be looking at. He didn't really have superpowers. He started a tech company and he built his own, and that is just one big, there's my, stop talking, please. That is just one, oh no, I don't mean to stop me stopping talking, right? That's just one big augmented reality visor he's wearing, and that ability for him then to have all of that data, all of that remote expert, it's been envisaged, and I really don't see any reason why we don't look at that and then apply it into the world of work. That's me, thank you very much.